Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Xiaolin Perspectives, and today we're going to be discussing episode 16 of Xiaolin Showdown, the Shard of Lightning, and as promised last week, it's back to business as usual at the Xiaolin Temple, as the episode opens with the Xiaolin monks as they're doing chores, although in this case they're using the Shengong Wu to try to make the chores go faster. Mostly because they think that with Wuya trapped in the puzzle box, they don't have to worry about all the big shit anymore. After all, Wuya was what they thought was the final boss. So since she's gone, the threats they'll be facing aren't going to be any big deal, so maybe all the Shengon Wu are good for right now is just helping with chores. Although Master Feng does lightly chastise the Xiaolin monks for this mindset, as he believes that this arrogance will come back to bite them. Also, he chews Raimundo out because how he used his Shengon Wu to help with his chores is that he used the Shroud of Shadows to just make a bunch of dirty dishes go invisible, so yeah, he didn't really do anything. However, he also went to see the Xiaolin monks for another reason. A new Shengong Wu has revealed itself. In this case, I want to say staff or stick or something. I don't know. It's a stick with an orb on it called the Shard of Lightning, which has the power to allow whoever wields it to move at the speed of light, but only for as long as a lightning blast. So basically maybe just a few seconds to maybe a minute. I don't know. It's never really defined. Point is, it allows someone to move at super speed, but only for short bursts of time. As such, the Xiaolin monks get armed and ready to go and get the Shengong Wu, but of course, the forces of evil want to get it too, as Jack Spicer's Shengong Wu detector goes off, which leads him to want to go get it. And as for Katnape, who we saw last week, yeah, she actually makes good on that little teaser we saw at the end of last week's episode, as she opens up the puzzle box that had Wuya and lets her out. And upon Wuya being released, she senses the shard of lightning revealing itself and immediately offers Katnape a job. Though Katnape's first response is, "What's in it for me?" However, Katnape, coincidence of all coincidences, released Wuya right where the Shard of Lightning was, which in this case is on a pier by the ocean, and the shard itself is actually located in a rock formation, and Dojo, well, he can't really get a good reading on it, mostly because it's in the middle of a lightning storm, and, well, lightning tends to hit the tallest object, which in this case is the flying dragon. As such, he ends up dropping the Xiaolin monks by the dock where they run into Katnape and Wuya, which shocks the Xiaolin monks because I think maybe in-universe a day has at least gone by. So, she didn't even stay in there for a week. It's just... I'll get to my thoughts on it later. Point is, they're shocked to see Wuya back, but immediately this shock is kind of pushed aside when Jack and his robots show up, and he immediately challenges the Xiaolin warriors. As such, they immediately go to confront Jack, only to find that he's a lot more competent in battle than he normally is. He brushes off their attacks, sidesteps any moves they do, and even at one point he gets tied up in one of Clay's lassos, and he not only gets out of it with a little effort, he ends up tying up Clay as well. As such, he sicks his jackbots on the group as they try and fight them off, while Katnape ends up unleashing her genetically altered super kittens on them. But in the midst of all this, Raimundo breaks away from the group and ends up climbing up the rock face as a blast of lightning wound up revealing the shard. However, just as Raimundo's about to get it, Jack swoops in and takes the shard himself before he ends up knocking Raimundo off the cliff. As such, with Jack now having the spoils, he runs away while everyone else just kind of has to lick their wounds. However, when the Xiaolin monks return back to their base, they begin wondering, well, how exactly did Jack get so good? He was a lot more competent this time around, and even his disses were apparently a lot better. Well, it turns out it's because the Jack that they fought there, it wasn't the real Jack. Rather, it was a robot duplicate that Jack created to be his new evil partner. Why? I don't really know. He made a chameleon bot once, and that one had more applications. This probably just pure ego stroking. Point is, Jack's new evil partner is literally himself, and he pretty much is just patting himself on the back, both figuratively and literally. In the meantime, though, with other bad guys, Wuya is continuing to try and get Katnape to work for her, even promising the standard fame, fortune, world domination, control, whatever you want kind of dealing that she gave Jack and Raimundo. Only this time, Katnape wants payment up front, and she makes a list of demands for Wuya, and Wuya, well, exasperated, does comply, as somehow Wuya is able to get Katnape everything she wants. Don't ask me how. Maybe she used her ghostly powers, or maybe she still had some lingering essence from when she was physical. I don't fucking know. It's never explained, and I don't get it. Point is, though, back with the good guys, they realized that their arrogance and overconfidence did come back and bite them, like Master Feng said. And unfortunately, they continue to face the consequences of that, because it turns out that Jack decides to use the Shard of Lightning to its fullest, as he and his robot duplicate use it to steal a good chunk of their Shengong Wu. As he and the Jack robot use the Shard, with them both being able to use it as apparently more than one person can use it if they're holding it when it activates, without triggering a showdown apparently, and they just run in and humiliate the monks and steal a good chunk of their Shengong Wu. I'm not going to list every single one, because it's a good chunk of them, but it's basically enough so that the tide is more turned to Jack's favor. The Xiaolin monks thankfully still have some Shengong Wu, so they're not out of the running, but Jack now got a very hefty win. And so after the humiliation of that, alongside other humiliations the Jacks did with the Shard, the Xiaolin monks get a second wind as Dojo reveals that another Shengong Wu has revealed itself. They never say the name of this Shengong Wu in the episode, but it's this silver manta ray called, well, the Silver Manta Ray, which it's basically like a hovercraft. There's really no other way to describe it. It's a handheld hovercraft that once you activate it, it turns giant size, and you can use it to literally fly wherever you want in the world. Applications are admittedly, the applications aren't as, well, numerous as other Shengong Wu, but it's a Shengong Wu that's a fucking hovercraft. That's kind of awesome. As such, the Xiaolin monks immediately go for it to get the Silver Manta Ray, and Katnape and Wuya end up going there as well, as Katnape does eventually agree to work for Wuya, but she still has a lot of stipulations with it, including that she only gets to work for 1 hour a day, and that there are some days she gets off. In the meantime, the Jacks end up getting there first, I guess alongside Katnape, and while Katnape does put her all into trying to find the Silver Manta Ray, well, the Jacks continue annoying her to the point where when her hour is up, she says, you know what, fuck this, I'm done, and she just leaves, telling Wuya that she can take this job and shove it. Which, much to Wuya's dismay, because now she really doesn't have anyone in her corner, which results in her trying to cozy up to the Jacks and say, maybe I was a little too hasty to get a new partner. As, in the meantime, the Xiaolin monks arrive as well, and while they end up running into the Jacks and get distracted with a bunch of Jackbots, also displaying some of their new moves, which I'll talk about when I get to the end of this, eventually they manage to find the Shard as well. Now, unfortunately, though, the Jacks end up making it there first, and so Omi ends up chasing after them until eventually both Jacks and Omi end up laying hands on the Silver Manta Ray. As such, Xiaolin showdown time, and for the first time since Shenyi Bu, we actually get to see a new variant on a Xiaolin showdown. In this case, a showdown trio. Basically, it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's just a three-way Xiaolin showdown. The rules are still the same, everyone still wages a Shengong Wu, it's just that there are 3 opponents instead of 2, all of them against each other. Yeah, the Jack robot ends up saying that he's double-crossing the original, and because, well, that's what evil partners do, they betray one another, which Jack's disappointed by, but he admits it's a valid point. As such, Omi, since he's the one that challenged the showdown, ends up making the challenge just a free-for-all. He and the Jacks will go head-to-head, and whoever is the last man standing wins, with Omi wagering the Tongue of Saiping, Jack wagering the Shard of Lightning, and the Jack robot wagering the Shroud of Shadows. As such, once everything is said and done, the Xiaolin Showdown is called, and again, really damn awesome effects, as the thing is, the Silver Manta Ray was located in a tree, so their arena becomes a giant tree of roots and thorns, and it's just really damn cool as all of them converge on the tree that Omi and the Jacks are on, and it just rises into the sky until it's basically just a giant cage of roots. It's awesome, and I dig it. As such, with the yell of Gong Yi Tong Pai, the Jacks and Omi get to fighting, or at the very least, the Jacks begin fighting, as they both get in each other's way, and while Jack Spicer tries using the Shard of Lightning to turn things into his favor, well, apparently the Jack robot was a lot more competent than him, because the Jack robot ends up knocking him right out of the cage arena, as he used the Shroud of Shadows to do a sneak attack and just throw his fleshy counterpart out. As such, it's just Omi and the Jack Robot now, and the Jack Robot attempts to try and do the same thing to him using the Shroud, but Omi decides to get a bit of help as he calls out to Jack and asks if he wants to get revenge on his robotic duplicate, which Jack kinda says he would, and so with Jack's advice, Omi's able to actually outsmart the Jack Robot, since, well, it's an exact copy of Jack. It thinks exactly the way he does. And so after learning what Jack would do in the situation, Omi is able to counter him before stealing the Shroud of Shadows and then using the Tongue of Sai-Ping to just unleash a horde of animals on the Jack Robot, ending the fight with him being crushed by an elephant. So Omi ends up winning the showdown, and thus he ends up winning the Silver Manta Ray, the Shard of Lightning, and the Shroud of Shadows. So all in a day's work. And so the episode ends as we see the Xiaolin monks using the Shard of Lightning to get their chores done faster, only for Master Feng to kind of turn that against them by saying that since they now have a lot more free time, they can do all these other chores that he has on a long list, which just causes all the Xiaolin monks to get angry at Omi because apparently it was his idea to use the shard to get their chores done faster. So there you go. Alright, so my thoughts on the episode. It's alright. It's just alright. When it comes down to it, the Shard of Lightning is just a back-to-basics episode. It's re-establishing the status quo that we've had for the previous series, and after the giant three-parter of In the Flesh, Days Past, and Citadel of Doom, again, it's kind of nice to have a breather. Just kind of nice to get back into our regular routine. Just seeing the Xiaolin monks train in the temple and overcoming a problem. The bad guys being bad and doing their own thing. Going out to find Shen Gong Wu, fighting the bad guys over it, having the bad guys pull a fast one on the good guys. It's just standard stuff that you would see in Xiaolin Showdown, which I'm okay with. It's fine. It's exactly what you would expect from this series. My problem, however, is it feels a little too basic, if that makes any sense. Here's the thing. My problem with this episode, believe it or not, is that it really wants to get back into the status quo of things, and sadly, that means it starts reestablishing things that I think we could do without. Case in point, let's talk about Wuya. I talked about this when I got into Citadel of Doom and how it was kind of disappointing that I thought Katnape was going to let Wuya out. And unfortunately, this episode doesn't really make for a good outing with that. Because here's the thing. Wuya, just an episode ago, was this big, enormous threat. She had got her full power back and had taken over the world, and it was only by the skin of the hero's teeth that they managed to beat her. So what happens? She's brought back the next episode and reverted right back into her original form, and she fulfills the exact same role that she had before that. Even though we had just built her up as the big bad, someone whose evil was so immense that her being released from the first puzzle box shifted the balance of good and evil in the world. And now she's reverted back to her original form. The thing is, I kind of understand this. When you have a show like Xiaolin Showdown, like I said, status quo is God. You need to keep a consistent status quo so the little kids don't get too confused. And the thing is, having Wuya back as her regular ghostly advisor with her own machinations for world domination, I think it can still work. The problem is that I think this was done too soon. If they really wanted to bring Wuya back, I think they should have spent more time with her stuck in the puzzle box. Maybe let Jack Spicer do his own thing. Just go around still messing with the Xiaolin monks and stealing things, etc. And if you really wanted him to have another partner, maybe you could have paired him up with one of the previous villains of the week. Maybe they want higher aspirations for world domination, so they go back to Jack and say, hey, I want in on this shit. Or hell, maybe do a revolving cast of the villains of the week. Actually have Jack have different characters to work off of, and they get either frustrated with Jack's incompetence, or Jack gets angry because he has to share the spotlight with people that also have aspirations for world domination. I feel like that would have been a cool dynamic, but no. They go right back to having Wuya. And unfortunately, the dynamic they set up with her doesn't last more than an episode, because unfortunately, the second flaw of this episode is Katnape. She is a pointless character in this episode. I'll take it back a little bit. She does end up releasing Wuya. She at least does that. And that's still a big thing considering that Wuya is going to become a regular character throughout is still going to be a regular character throughout the rest of the series. The problem is Katnape is still not that great of a villain. I hesitate to call her bad because she's not. She's got enough cool gimmicks that she can be intimidating. But I think I've used this wording in a previous vlog, but she's like a less interesting Catwoman. And the reason for that is there's nothing to her beyond the fact that she wants to live the high life, and that she's got like a cat gimmick with her whole jumpsuit and weapons and so forth. To kind of compare her to another cat-themed supervillain, Catwoman is interesting because while Catwoman is kind of a thief with special skills, what makes her cool to watch is her special relationship to the heroes, as well as her shifting alliances. While Catwoman for the most part can be considered one of the bad guys, there are times when she does help the heroes due to her own unique moral code. She will sometimes say, I want to help you guys and I have my own reasons for it. It's never always I'm evil for the sake of evil, or I want to be a good guy. She kind of skirts the line. That's what makes her interesting, as whenever we see Catwoman again, we're kind of interested in seeing what she'll do and whose side she'll fall on. And even if she's on the opposite side of the heroes, her unique relationship to the heroes at least makes her somewhat interesting to see whenever she pops up in comics and shows or movies. Whereas Katnape does not have that nuance. Katnape is just your basic spoiled rich brat, and I am comfortable calling her that, considering that the first time we saw her, she was attending a party at Jack's house, and it was clear that party was being thrown by his parents, who are apparently kind of loaded. Otherwise, how would their son be able to afford making a bunch of robots? So, and it's clear, and the thing is, Katnape doesn't do this whole evil villain shtick because she has higher aspirations. She's just kind of spoiled and wants to live the high life. That is the extent of Katnape and her aspirations as a villain. She just wants to steal the shiny things and live a comfortable life without having to actually put any work in beyond figuring out how to steal something. And that's why I don't really care for her as a villain. I still don't hate her, because there are still unique and cool aspects to her. She is a competent villain, and she can be fun to watch due to her attitude. The problem is that there are so many better villains who do have those higher aspirations and thus are more interesting. I can still watch an episode with, like, say, Tubby Mora in it, because Tubby Mora at least feels like he has higher aspirations and wants to do more as a villain. And then, let me think if I can think of another villain of the week. I could watch something like, say, the Sapphire Dragon, because the Sapphire Dragon had, again, bigger aspirations. Hell, even the Chameleon Bot, despite its initial episode being not that good, at the very least still felt like it still felt more interesting because of what this thing could do. The Chameleon Bot could at least do some clever subterfuge by blending in with the good guys, replacing them, and working against them without anyone knowing. Katnape does not give a shit. She just does whatever she wants and doesn't really give a damn about the consequences, which I guess makes sense considering that she's cat-themed, and cats are famous for just being kind of, finicky when it comes to certain things. But as a character, it makes her not that fun to watch. Or even as a villain, it doesn't really make her interesting when you have other villains who do have higher aspirations and clearly do care more about getting to their ends versus Katnape, who feels like she wants to be taken more seriously than everybody else. And it's not that great. And as a result, it doesn't really work. And as a result, she's also kind of she also is kind of a flawed character. Although, admittedly, I did find it kind of funny that Wuya tried to pull the exact same shit with Katnape that she did with her two previous associates, only for Katnape to be more demanding than Wuya expected, and for Wuya to quickly realize, oh, this was a mistake, and only sticking with Katnape because she really didn't have any other options. It was actually, I do find that funny. And when Katnape does tell Wuya to shove it, I do like that Wuya just goes right up to Jack and says, maybe I was a bit hasty to throw you to the curb like that. Again, which I kind of like. I still like. That's another thing that I kind of like about what that Jack and Wuya have in common. They're both very opportunistic villains. Like I said, Wuya tended to go to Jack because she really had no other options, but at the same time, she's not really in a position to be picky. She cannot, she needs people to do her dirty work since she's in her ghostly form now. And so, even an incompetent buffoon like Jack is probably someone that she wants on her side because he's at least putting in the effort to want to take over the world versus someone like Katnape who couldn't give two shits about taking over the world. Which, again, I kind of love. Kind of love that. So, at the very least, that's at least funny. But it also does lead to another flaw, which, again, is not with this episode, but with later ones. Wuye goes back to working with Jack. And the thing is, I'm not against that. Again, if we had waited a little bit before they had joined back up, I would have been fine with it. Again, Jack and Wuye's dynamic is a clever and unique one. But the problem with having Wuya come back and then having her go back to Jack in the next episode, which she does, is the fact that the last time that Wuya tried doing this whole kissing up thing with Jack, he told her to piss off, especially since he found a replacement for her in the form of his Shengong Wu detector. Which, why does he take her back? Is it because his Jack robot told him to piss off and he just wants to have a partner because so he doesn't feel lonely? Admittedly, that kind of would make sense for a wuss like Jack, but at the same time, he seemed to be fine working alone at the end of season 1, so what changed between then and now? Is it because between then and now he realized, oh, I do actually like having someone around? I don't know. It just kind of feels weird to me. I feel like, again, it would have been better if Jack and Wuya maybe formed another uneasy alliance, and maybe we had a moment where Wuya just finally reluctantly told Jack, listen, kid, I need you, and I know that you're gonna need me, so I know we've done a lot of shit to piss each other off, but how about until we each get what we want, we just tolerate one another? Does that sound good? I feel like it would have been at least nicer. I'm saying nicer when it comes to supervillains here, but at the very least, I think it would have been a lot more satisfying to see them both just reluctantly join back up again, if just for the sake of they both want to rule the world and they kind of need the other's help to do it. Maybe the Shingon Wu tracker gets destroyed, we don't end up seeing it be destroyed. But at the very least, I think it would have been a lot better if we had at least just taken our time with all these things. And I feel like that's the biggest problem. The episode is so quick to reestablish the status quo that it doesn't really leave a lot of time for things to kind of settle. The only thing that really stays settled from the previous episodes is that Raimundo is not a Xiaolin apprentice in this episode. He's still a dragon in training, and to kind of show the differentiation between him and the other Xiaolin warriors, it's his sash. I didn't mention this before because I really didn't feel it was important in the grand scheme of the story, but the way that the other Xiaolin monks represented as Xiaolin apprentices is their sash color. The Xiaolin apprentices have blue sashes, while Raimundo still has the standard black sash, which we didn't see in season 1. It was something they started doing in season 2, but I do at least like it. It's a nice aesthetic change to show that they are moving up. So, and the thing is, it's still even acknowledged in this episode that Raimundo is not a Xiaolin apprentice yet. So, at the very least, that's still carried over. But again, kind of getting to spoiler territory, this season doesn't really like taking its time with these plot developments, which I think is to the detriment of the show, to be honest. Which like I said, when it comes, status quo is God with this show, and we've seen it with various other shows. They don't want to shake things up too much or otherwise they'll risk confusing their target demographic. After all, if a bunch of kids came on having watched some of season 1 and then popped into season 2 and saw all these big changes, they'd be wondering, what the heck happened? Did I miss some episodes here? Why are all these characters so different? Why is the situation so different? Which I get. But maybe there are some things that you could have changed that wouldn't have made the show so alienating. Maybe, like I said, we could have seen Jack without Wuya for a little while. We could have built up Wuya's return. We could have actually had so many things get built up, but instead the show is quick to return to form. And sadly, I think that's to its detriment, at least in the beginning. Like I said, despite all my criticisms, the episode is still all right. While there are aspects that I think they could have took their time reintroducing, there are the other aspects I do think work. Like I said, it's nice to see it's nice to see a return to form as it makes for a good breather episode after the intense three-parter that we just had. And what makes it better is that there are other positive developments. Case in point, the Xiaolin warriors themselves. As with 3/4 of the Xiaolin monks now upgraded to the rank of Xiaolin apprentice, they all start utilizing more elemental moves. Like, here's the thing. Going back to season 1, I mentioned how during fight scenes, the Xiaolin monks would yell their element before engaging in battle. Well, it's upgraded in this season, as this season, the Xiaolin monks now have their own unique elemental moves. And the thing is, we have kind of seen this in season 1. In the second episode, whose name eludes me, we saw Omi practicing a unique elemental move in the form of the Tsunami Strike, which, while we never saw him use it again, those kinds of moves are actually expanded on for season 2, as now each of the Xiaolin monks have developed their own unique moves that actually directly tap into their element. We see Omi utilizing a move called the Tornado Strike, which actually allows him to directly control water. We see Clay use something called the Seismic Kick, which literally allows him to shake the earth with a kick. We see Kimiko using something called the Judo Lei Flip, which has her do a flip through fucking fire rings, and even Raimundo, despite him being a dragon in training, has something called a Typhoon Boom, where he can clap his hands and use the wind to create a sonic boom. It's actually pretty damn cool. And I'm going to look over the fact that Raimundo has been taught this even though he's not a Xiaolin apprentice. I'm going to assume that because the majority of his class, so to speak, and I use class in air quotes there, has been taught these moves, it only makes sense that he at least be trained in them as well. And going back to my argument that maybe Master Feng does want to promote him, it's just that Raimundo needs to realize he deserves to be in that rank. It would make sense that while Master Feng wouldn't teach him certain things, there are other things he'd be more willing to teach him, which in this case are these new elemental moves. So, which I like. It shows the Xiaolin monks are improving in their craft, and they are growing into their own as Xiaolin warriors, as they're now tapping more directly into their elements in their fighting styles, actually using the elements that they each represent, which I dig. Again, it shows growth with the characters, shows them advancing in their training, and actually is pretty visually spectacular to watch, and shows that they don't have to rely as heavily on the Shengong Wu anymore. Which I'm not saying that they weren't competent before, because they weren't, but at the very least, it is still cool to see them actually getting stronger. So again, that's nice. Well, if I want to get into my thoughts, and if I want to get more into positives, my thoughts on the Shengong Wu. The Shard of Lightning, as I said last week, is another OP Shengong Wu. It only appears in this episode, and I don't think it ever appears again. But it's still a pretty damn cool one. A shard that lets whoever use it move at supersonic speed, at super light speed, get a bunch of things done in the span of a few seconds before returning back to normal time. That's pretty damn awesome. And on top of that, the Silver Manta Ray, well, I admit, is not as creative as other Shengong Wu. Like I said, it's basically just a hovercraft. It's a Shengong Wu that's a hovercraft. I already love it, so it's cool. Otherwise, though, the episode, like I said, is just alright. It's just a return to form, a reestablishing of the status quo, and that's really all it needs to be. It's not perfect, like I said, and like I said, it has its fair share of problems. There are some things I think that the episode could have taken its time with better, and again, still not that much of a fan of Catnape in the grand scheme of things. But otherwise, the episode is just alright. Nice little breather after the big three-parter we got, so yeah, overall, just alright. So yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and tune in next week as we see another OP Shengong Wu reveal itself in an episode that, to my knowledge, is kind of dumb, but hey, maybe my opinion will change. So, till then, I hope you have a good Friday, and take care.